Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. Well, this past week marked 5 years since the very first case of COVID 19. And as I was reading about that, it also hit me like a ton of bricks of how far I've come in those 5 years. So it's been a bittersweet 5 years, I want to say. And so I thought I would record a video to refocus some goals of the next 5 years. There are a lot of things I did right during the last 5 years, but a lot of things I could have done a different way. And so these last couple of weeks have really helped me reflect on that, especially ever since I took the trip to Taiwan, because that was the only trip I took in the post-COVID era, if you could believe the first flight that I took in the post-COVID era. So I began the decade with two issues. They're going to sound very foreign now, but I'll reiterate. At the time, I was grappling with binge eating disorder, if you could believe it. Now, I wasn't overweight, but the problem was that the binge eating was creating its own set of dramas. So, for example, I would be needing to go somewhere, and I wouldn't want to put down my food. Travel was tricky sometimes. I would. One of my favorite examples was in March of 2020, we had just locked down. One day I was texting my boss. I was teaching at a technical institute. I was texting my boss about what we were going to do with the students. And my boss, as we were texting, he says, "Why don't I call you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm eating. I can't." My fingers were texting, but my mouth was busy eating. But I could text him. I didn't want to tell him that because, after all, this was a once in a lifetime event. I didn't want to create any more drama. After all, they probably need to get rid of half of the professors anyway. I didn't want to create any drama that said pick me, right, to get rid of, right? And so I had to put down my food, but I was so upset. And that was not an uncommon occurrence to me, by the way. So binge eating disorder was the first thing that was on my mind going into the decade. The second thing on my mind was at the time I had a girlfriend and I was upset at not having space to myself. I know it's hard to believe now, but at the time, it was almost like a lover's triangle in its own way. And so those were the two issues that I was hoping to resolve in 2020 before the big event broke out. The big event kind of changed the landscape of both of those. I'll get to that in a second. But one day I had gone to the grocery store, and half of my favorite foods were sold out because toilet paper was also sold out. Everybody was just crazy over hoarding everything in the store. And I used that as an opportunity to remind myself of the resolution and also to remind myself that there are people who need that food more than I do. Right? I wasn't going to die from not having whatever. There are other people who might, right? And so at the beginning of the pandemic, or at least the lockdown, I went on a 48-hour fast, and it really helped clear my head of a lot of stuff that didn't need to be in my head. The lockdown happened, and then I moved to the Rocky Mountains, as you guys remember. I was in Wallace, Idaho for 4 months. I need to find my way back there. The people there were very nice to me. Uh, and so I broke up with my girlfriend. She and I both realized that we weren't ready to move things as fast as her family wanted. Her parents were wanting her to get married, and that was creating a lot of friction, a lot of drama. In 2019, I took a trip to Taiwan. You guys may remember I was talking about how that was my last trip as a single guy. And, well, I've now proven it wasn't, although my last trip also had some relationship drama. I'll get to that in a second. Uh, and so I was in Wallace, Idaho for 4 months. And so it was around that time that we finalized the breakup. And the people in Wallace were very nice about uh, the situation with the breakup. And had I stayed there, I think there's a good chance that I would have met somebody there. But of course, we had to return to the office. And then I come back home to Seattle. When we first reopened, I wanted to get over my fear of loud environments. I am autistic. And for a time, a lot of venues were open 25-50% capacity, right? Remember those good old days? And I took up bowling at the time. It was really nice because only every other lane was open and there wasn't a whole lot of noises. And so even during the nighttime events, there was music, but there wasn't a whole lot of people speaking over the music. You know what? What really what sucks even more than having Taylor Swift turned up to volume 11 is having Taylor Swift up to volume 11 and people talking volume 13 over her. That will drive me nuts. That kind of environment. But having only Taylor Swift in the background, that I can tolerate that. And so that was good. That was good. I distinctly remember going to the bowling alley, and at the time, Taylor Swift was kind of taking a break from her music. She was re-recording her album, so we didn't hear a lot of that. But Ava Max was doing really well that year, and I distinctly remember her music playing in the background, and me scoring my first 160, 170, 180. I eventually scored my highest so far is 242, I think. And I still got a ways to go, but unfortunately, we then opened 100%, and it wasn't so appealing to me anymore. Maybe I'll give it another try at some point. After all, I do want to mingle more these days. And then we returned to the office. Unfortunately, Washington Tech folded not long after we returned to the office. A lot of students didn't want to go back to the office, it seemed like. And that's when I moved to Phoenix, Arizona. My first job in Phoenix, Arizona was kind of toxic, but I still have to credit them for being the catalyst for what allowed me to move. You see, when I first moved to Phoenix, I had a little bit of a dilemma. I had a hard time applying for jobs in Phoenix because people wondered if I would actually commit to the move, right? But at the same time, I didn't want to move over here and be unemployed and living out of my car. And you know, that's hard to apply for a job in that kind of situation, too. I ran into a little bit of a quandary. I'm not a big liar, by the way. Some people just say that I'm going to make it a conviction. I'm going to be moving because of family. But I'm not a big liar until I discovered one thing. You got to remember, 2022, I was in a committed relationship with myself. And so I told the recruiter, I'm moving to Phoenix to be closer to my boyfriend. And I didn't feel like I was lying when I said it that way. So I probably could have passed the polygraph test with that statement. I really could have, because I didn't feel I was lying anymore. It's kind of weird. If you suck at lying, but you need to tell a white lie for some reason, rephrase it in a way that doesn't feel like a lie in your head. It will come out so much better. But 2 weeks before I moved to Phoenix, there was another pivotal event in my life. I was working at a different tutoring center in Seattle. Actually, that job was a lot cleaner than the one in Phoenix. Unfortunately, the hours didn't work right at the end. But I had a relatively clean job in terms of workplace toxicity. Strike that. It probably wasn't clean. The issue was that my boss was Korean, and so I connected very well with him. But I had a few other colleagues who didn't stay there. I don't know if I felt like I was taking the better side of the favoritism there, and I kind of didn't feel okay with that either. But one day I had a student who was studying AP chemistry, and he had brought in this periodic table that was really fancy. It showed the rarity of all the elements on the table, and I was just about to show him that platinum is so undervalued right now. It is rarer than gold, and right now only going for a half of the price, right, in 2022. And I was just about to show him that when I noticed that, hey, a few doors to the right of all that, bismuth is only twice as common as gold. I didn't know the price at the time, believe it or not, but I knew it was a lot lower than gold because I knew that sometimes you go to a arts and craft show and they have bismuth crystals, right? That was the only extent that I knew bismuth, and I knew some people eat it in the form of Pepto Bismol. It can't be that expensive, right? And so I said, take a look at platinum and maybe bismuth. That's how I put it at the time. And so I left it at that. And so when I went home, I decided to Google just how much bismuth is worth and how one can buy it. And before I knew it, I had ordered a 10-pound bismuth bar. Now, at the tutoring center, oftentimes we're sitting down at our desks for multiple hours in a row, not very healthy. And so I took the 10-pound bar of bismuth into the office to use as gym weights to lift. And my student came back and I was like, hey, look what I bought. And he thought it was platinum. And I was like, I wish. It's bismuth. Remember how rare it is? And I'm lifting gym weights and I'm telling my student about that. And he just thought I was crazy. And so I was like, it only cost me $70. How many times have you seen somebody put $70 in the lottery machine, right? Just treat it like that, right? This one actually has a better chance of winning, a much better chance of winning, probably, right? And so and when I described it like that, he kind of understood a little bit better. A few days later, I discover how to make bismuth crystals, and I make a few of them. And it just brings a good rapport with all the students. And I'm going to get to another moment of a few years after that where I became the catalyst for one of my friends investing in precious metals. So it's all good, all full circle, right? But I moved to Phoenix, and then I took the job at the community college where I'm teaching now. I have good rapport with all of my students. Actually, one of my students, see, I love it when I get to learn these life hacks like investing in the bismuth, and sometimes my students pick up life hacks from me. Lately, I've been eating a lot of, and this has become almost an eating disorder in its own right. I've been eating a lot of celery. Celery has this compound that makes guys smell attracted to girls. A lot of people don't think it works, but you know what? The results speak for themselves, right? I'll get to that in a second. I've been eating a lot of celery, and I'll be in my office munching away at it. My students will come for office hours. And so one of my students thought that was the most wonderful idea in the world, but not because, well it's a girl, but she wants to lose weight. And she notices that I've been losing a lot of weight uh, during the semester. And so I told her, the weight loss is like a side effect for me. I wish I could eat celery and not lose so much weight. And when I told her why I was eating the celery, she laughed out of control. She didn't think it would work. Funny thing is that she laughed out of control, but guess what? She stayed in my office talking to me about all sorts of stuff for 20 minutes, all while telling me that the celery is doing nothing to attract girls. And I had to bite my lips to keep from laughing and to keep myself from pointing that out to her. This is really funny. But last winter, I was having such a hard time getting back into the dating scene. And I started fantasizing about moving out of the Phoenix area. Phoenix is tough. You go to any sort of social event, first of all, practically everybody drinks. I have a roommate who's an alcoholic, and he drives me nuts. I don't mind him drinking, but he drinks and then he crashes in the living room like every night. He hasn't touched his bedroom. I'm going to have to go to his bedroom at some point and make a disaster out of it to force him to want to go back to make sure I don't do that. Maybe sleep in it from time to time, or maybe when I have a girl over and I don't want to mess up my own bed, maybe do my business in his bedroom instead. That will probably inspire him to want to care for his bedroom, right? But he crashes in the living room. And then he gets upset that other people want to use it. Like the other day, I was eating a little bit louder than he would like. It was 7, 8 p.m. And I was eating a soup that was really... And he moaned, stop it! Stop it! And I played dumb. I'm like, stop what? And he's so drunk out of his mind. He can't even form anything more intellectual than stop it. And so I just reminded him, "Hey, you got a bedroom. Well, you got a very nice bedroom, by the way. Your room is bigger than mine." And so he didn't want to listen to that. I don't know why. I'm gonna have to one of these days, maybe when we live with the owner, maybe the owner and I will have to clean house anyway, decorate or repaint something, and we'll have a chance to go into his bedroom and see what's going on, right? But that's the kind of, well, most people aren't that drunk, but mingling with people here almost requires you to be tolerant